What's good, everybody? Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Over Quota. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. And I must say, before I get into it, that if you are a regular listener of the Over Quota podcast, it's been several weeks since I've recorded an episode, and I'm feeling, frankly, guilty and a little bit in my head about it because I made a commitment that I would be consistently producing content every Monday since February 3rd of 2020. And I was so proud to be saying that. And then over the last few weeks, frankly, I have not, just because the business, frankly, has gotten overwhelming, which is a good thing, right? I mean, there's definitely pent up demand that I need to support from my clients, companies that are looking for salespeople and sales leaders. So that's what I've been doing, but I promise I will get back to more consistency. So anyways, with that, like always, the J. David Group, which is my company, is sponsoring this episode. My company helps founders and CEOs turn their startups into unicorns by introducing them to CROs and VPs of sales with track records of generating revenue, building teams, and scaling growth. And this podcast is also now being sponsored by Allego. For all you sales leaders out there, if you ever absolutely nailed a sales training or had a rep who killed a presentation that you wished you recorded to be seen later by new hires or other members of the team, well, that's just one of the things that Allego can do. Not only does it allow you to record your best content for practice, collaboration, and feedback, but it gives you a way to organize all of your best content in one place so it's easily accessible to help improve sales performance for everyone. So please email me, Webb, that's with 2 B's, at thejdavidgroup.com so I can personally introduce you to someone who will take great care of you. Now, my guest today is Deric Peterson, who's the Vice President of Commercial Line Sales at Verisk, which is a leading provider of data analytics, enabling organizations to make better decisions about risk, investments, and operations. Deric, welcome to Over Quota.
Hey, Jay, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. As you can see, I lost my video there. A little bit shot out of a cannon because I've just been so busy and I need to keep up my energy through all this, but I am doing fantastic and I appreciate you making some time for me today.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So let's just start with what I just ended with. Tell me a little bit about your role at Verisk and a little bit of what Verisk provides.
Yeah, so thanks. I work within Verisk's insurance division. My organization is responsible for sales here in the United States, covering the commercial lines underwriting organizations within the largest carriers, brokers, and MGAs here in the U.S.
Fantastic. And, as I do these interviews, one of the things that I talk to you about during our pre-interview, as I talk to everybody about during pre-interviews, is the structure is vision, strategy, and execution, right? Like if you have a certain vision, how do you get there through strategic thinking and executing on that, which could be coaching, training, hiring, those types of things. But one of the things that came up during our discussion prior to this was something that interested me that I hung on during that discussion, and I want to talk to you about, which is the step back that you took earlier in your career when you had started off as a sales rep and then moved up as a sales director. I believe you had global sales responsibility, and then transitioned back into an individual contributor. And that comes up often when I'm interviewing candidates for particular opportunities who are at that almost an inflection point between a great potential opportunity, but then perhaps taking a step back. And I want to explore that a little bit with you to help me get better insights into your thinking, and then also to help people that are listening that may be at that crossroads in their own career in terms of this is a great opportunity, but I'd have to take a step back, maybe in title and in compensation. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was about 15 years into my sales career, and I've been in sales ever since I came out of college. And I was in an industry really primarily driven through office products and software around, printers, copiers, imaging, and software to facilitate workflow. And I had actually, as you had mentioned, I'd progressed through multiple roles, both at headquarters of a Fortune 500 company, all the way back down to a smaller $50 million organization that was family owned. And during that time, I was able to gain some perspective, kind of personally and professionally, right? During that evolution through my career, I had at the time seemingly reached what I had thought was a pinnacle of where I could take myself. And I was head of global sales for a company. As you had mentioned, I had sales reps around the world. We were growing the business and we were successful. But ultimately, what happened is for me, I wasn't personally fulfilled, because having had the role, I realized that I was capable of more, but the industry in which I found myself wasn't going to allow me to fulfill that. So then through my network and people that I had worked with in the past, I had been connected to a leading data and analytics provider on the software side. And through a series of meetings, it became clear that it was an organizational fit as well as an industry fit to allow me to grow my career to that next level. I have to say, when I stepped back, and I called a mentor, and for anybody that doesn't have a mentor, I can't stress it enough. My mentor had been a previous vice president, and he knew me personally as well as professionally. And he said, listen, you're a salesperson. You've been betting on yourself since you started your career. If you continue to believe in what you are and who you are, then go take the bet on yourself. You'll be successful. And so ultimately, with that reinforcement of betting on me, I made the move and went back to become an individual contributor, and started what I'd say is the next act of my professional career.
I have a follow-up question to that, but before I forget this question that just popped up, at what point in your journey was that? You mentioned, I think you had been an individual contributor for how long, and then became the head of global sales for how long?
Yeah. So roughly 4 or 5 years as an individual contributor, just pounding the pavement and learning the trade, and frankly, learning the skill of being a salesperson. Then I had an opportunity to move to a headquarters of a company and be a executive liaison and subject matter expert within a subset of products. Then became leadership for 4 years, and then got the global sales job.
Got it. Okay. You mentioned you realized that you thought you had reached the pinnacle, but then you felt that you were capable of more, right? Define that for me at that moment. When you say capable of more, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say, and it was very humbling, is I was young enough where I was enamored with, wow, let's keep climbing the ladder with role and title, and got sucked into that, right? And took a job, which frankly was the best experience I could have had, because there were pros and cons to that. And what I realized, though, through my leadership and skill, because I had gone from a Fortune 500, roughly 11,000 person company, down to a $50 million, from a multi-billion to a $50 million company, and I'm driving sales, and I'm looking around, and there are 150 people. When I came from a team of 500 plus, I was like, wait a second, I'm applying principles that are big business capable, bigger than the business I was at, but it wasn't fulfilling. It just wasn't getting me to where I was. And so I had hit a point where we were making moves that was providing growth, but ultimately it had capped out at the company I was at. And it made me realize that, hey, I could have stayed and I could have been locally successful, but I was in my mid-30s, and I was, and even today, I refuse to think that my career has reached the pinnacle or the cap of where it is, right? Again, back to what my mentor had told me, hey, you've been betting on yourself, and as long as you do, then you got to keep believing in you. And that's what happened.
As an individual contributor who was betting on himself, first of all, why? Where did that belief come from? You mentioned mentors. I wonder if you had a mentor earlier in your life that taught you to believe in yourself, or maybe you had success early in your life that enabled you to believe in yourself, number one. And then also with that mentality, talk to me about what were some of the behaviors and activities that you did consistently enough to make you an outstanding individual contributor.
Yeah. So first off, I've had some tremendous mentors, both what I would say peers that are, maybe, 10, 15 years older than me from when I walked in my first job, and, my, one of my good friends, even to this day, was a mentor to me, and he was the greatest individual contributor I ever know, right? He knew where he was good. He didn't want to get caught up in leadership. And he was a global award-winning salesperson. And so when I came in, I was able to kind of get with him. And he was the one who kept a 21-year-old bright-eyed kid who had decided to come out of college and go into sales, and kind of kept me on the rails. And then as I grew my career, sales leaders and people through relationships that I had made, just to be able to ask them questions, because they knew I was inquisitive about how did they get to where they were and what did I need to do, right? So you ask the what, right? So for me personally, and the what did I do and how did I arrive at where I did? I'm an only child raised by a single parent, right? It was me and my mom growing up. So my mom was working, and if I wanted to go see people, if I wanted to go do something, I had to go create it myself. Right. I had to go, this is back before texting and calling. Like, you hopped on your bike, you rode down the street, and you knocked on your buddy's door. And, truth be told, I was always the kid that was up there knocking on people's doors, probably waking up some parents, because I was like ready to go. Well, bring that forward, through whether it be high school, college, making relationships. I chose a career that allowed me to be me, that allowed me to go out, foster relationships, ask people, what they were trying to get to, what was important to them, and it's just trying to help them. If through friendships, right? When you think you're a kid, right? All you want to do is like, hey, we just want to have fun. Okay, what do you want to do? Well, when you get into business, it's like, hey, what do you want to do? I just want to have fun. I want to be successful. And so when you can approach conversations like that, it allowed people just to realize, like, okay, hey, this guy's just here and he's genuine in what he's trying to do. And that's what helped me along the way.
You mentioned that your friend slash mentor, greatest individual contributor you ever knew. What were some of the things that stood out about him? And then what did you, implement into your own sales process and your own approach to sales, given what you just said?
I would say the number one thing at the time that I learned from this gentleman, and as I got to know him, he's like, oh, they've been asking me to get into leadership forever. I don't want any part of it. And he said, it's very easy for me to control the controllables by being an individual contributor. Right. And that right there was the one thing I picked up very quickly, because he said, I just get to focus on my business, advocate for my customer, help them meet their initiatives, meet their goals, and I'm being successful through that. Because I don't have aspirations for leadership, I don't need to care about who's meeting with who and who's angling for what positions and all of that. I just control my controllables. And for an impressionable 21-year-old that's walking into the business world of a Fortune 500 company at the time, that was the biggest, absolutely biggest bit of advice that he gave me, and I still carry to this day. Because at the end, if you are successful, you will, the opportunities will find you, right? If you're constantly angling, then ultimately you might just be a shooting star, right? You may get to the top, but you're going to flame out real fast. And I think whether it be myself, I have plenty of examples I can think of. You're shaking your head. I'm sure you know some of those people, and I'm sure the people listening here, right? They're so preoccupied with how do they get to the next role that they haven't necessarily earned the role that they're at in a way that their peers respect them. So it then becomes natural when they go into a leadership position or the next level, because they're just out there embracing the grind for what their role is today and focused on it. And that quite frankly, Jay, that's how I've always just approached things, is just stay dialed in on the task at hand. And then ultimately, good things will happen if you're doing your job right. It's just really natural.
How do you, I understand that, but so how do you balance that with what we were talking about earlier, right? Where you knew that you were capable of doing more. So you know you're capable of doing more simultaneously while staying in the moment, right? In other words, staying with what you need to be focused on. And use the word that's interesting to me, which is angling. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that angling mindset, I guess you will, because I think there are two different things
well, listen, you say angling, I think of two things. One, angling, if you're advocating for yourself, which everybody should do, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're angling, to me, that says you're always trying to look for the edge or play the game because you want it to work for you. Like, I believe in personal advocation of oneself, right? Like, at the end, if you don't believe in yourself, then how's anybody else going to believe in you? So you got to advocate for yourself. But there's also an aspect of when you're angling for something, right, or advocating for something, if you're honest with yourself as to the why, that's what motivates, right? For me, if you can't be honest with yourself about why do I want that role? Why do I want that position? Why do I want that territory, that account, that title, right? Like, I had convinced myself when I was younger that, it's all about running something global and it's all about a great title, only to find out that, well, listen, anybody can be global. Heck, a one-man business can be global with an internet page now, right? So it was a matter about stepping back, being introspective about what I wanted, and then advocating for myself. But ultimately, I had to advocate for myself by leaving a business because I had realized that business wasn't capable about getting me to where it is today. I have kids and they're both athletes. And, we all know the sports analogy, right? Someday the ball bounces your way and some days it doesn't, right? Well, the same thing goes with opportunity. If it doesn't work out, well, you just don't get up and leave. You ask yourself the why, and then you work harder, right? You go make that happen. You earn your opportunities. Nothing's given. And by being introspective, you're honest with yourself. And I've been honest with myself. And frankly, that gets back to the confidence of, hey man, I'm betting on myself and I'm willing to take those bets that I think frankly are de-risked because I know who I am.
How do you, from a coaching perspective, right, as a sales leader, how do you coach those behaviors and that thought process, and what is your approach to motivating the right behaviors?
Yeah, the benefit I have, Jay. So I was an individual contributor, subject matter expert, sales leader, global director, back to a sales rep, back to a sales director, to a VP, and now and VP of multiple organizations. The one thing I always do, and I make it clear, is to my teams, I never ask them to do things that I have never done. So whether that be the actions of cold calling, prospecting, how you look at your territories, it's always under the nature of, I did the same thing, right? And in giving them the coaching of, this is why I did what I did, and I believe you'll be better for it. The other thing that I'm very clear about when I talk to all of my team is, in team now and teams in the past, is my goal is to give them transferable skills, right? Ultimately, let's be honest, we're all not working at the steel mills of the 1960s where we're going to be here for our entire working career, right? There's opportunity out there for salespeople. And I believe part of what makes people want to stay at a job is the company and the people they work for and with. And so when I articulate, back to your question, when I articulate this coaching, it's like, hey, this is my position of where I'm coming from. This is why I'm giving it to you, but I also think you're going to be better for it. And so let's discuss, let's get in, let's strategize. While at the same time, frankly, keeping an open mind, because as a leader, I realize I'm two steps removed, right? Because I'm a VP, I have frontline sales managers and then sales teams. I listen, because I am that much removed. You know, maybe they're seeing something that that might cause us to have to pivot and adjust to a new dynamic. Look what we all just went through in the last 18 months about going from being a face-to-face sales world to just like you and I are today here on Zoom.
When you're listening, what are you listening for? In other words, how do you validate what you're hearing one way or the other?
Yeah, the first thing I listen to is the rep. There's levels of what they're doing. Are they just telling me they're doing things? Are they telling me things that are then tactics? Or are they telling me why they need to do what they're doing because it leads to a bigger part of a strategy? So I'm really listening to, what's your approach? What's the end game? How does this situation fit in your broader opportunity plan to go maybe close, or in your broader account plan about how you're going to take them from being an account that might hit a lot of singles and doubles to account that can hit triples and home runs in terms of deal size.
I know that you mentioned during our pre-interview, if you will, that you like to foster a data-driven culture. Tell me a little bit about that and where that comes into play.
Yeah, I mean, within any sales role, any rep in any capacity within the sales arm, you only have so many cycles a day that you can engage. And frankly, we're all on the clock, right? We all start on January 2nd and we get until December 31st, assuming a calendar fiscal year, to make every day and every minute count, right? And it's just not enough to have a sense of urgency, because you can work hard but not smart. So what we do, and something I've done here over the last, I'd say 10 years of my leadership career, is really help people take a step back, look at their territory, and get down into the account level and say, let's map where the opportunities are. Let's map where our weaknesses and strengths are. Let's get into, do you have the right contacts, or do you need to go foster those contacts? So then when you're mapping out the steps you need to get to success at maybe the micro level of a contact that then builds into the macro level of an account, you're mapping out your time, and you're able to calibrate against that. Now, the best way to do that is through the data, right? You have the activity, you have the pipeline, you have the analysis of white space that allows you to look both ahead and behind about, hey, where's the opportunity ahead of me? And what have I done in the past to help get there? And where do I need to recalibrate? Because maybe I'm going in the wrong direction. And that could be all the way down to multiple calls on a person, multiple calls within a department. Maybe you're not calling high enough. Maybe you're not getting wide enough. But being able to look back at the actions are frankly very valuable when you're trying to analyze and adjust on the fly, or as we say, building the plane on the fly, right? I mean, that's what we do every year, and then we get to start it all over again, on January 2nd.
How much, if it were a pie chart, broken down on a pie chart, how much of your time is spent doing that in terms of analyzing the data and wrapping your arms around it so that you can coach your frontline managers to coach their team better, versus time spent either in front of customers or with your frontline managers? And then, since that example that we just talked about is primarily managing sales people, when you're sitting down with your managers, what are you coaching them on doing, I guess?
Yeah. So we're very collaborative. I foster collaboration. When I get on customer meetings, I like to say I work with my people. I'm not their boss, and that's true, right? So I try not to get hung up on titles, because ultimately, if we're all bought in and moving in the same direction, everybody knows how to read an org chart. But ultimately, if we're all aligned around the same plan and want to be successful together, then we break down the barriers of formality and know that we're all rowing in the same direction. So back to what you had said about the data and how do we do it. At all of my stops, when I've inherited teams, it takes time One, because you got to set up the framework, and then you have to consistently reinforce so everybody gets on board with what I'm driving from the top down approach. But along the way, there's an education that happens at two levels, right? You have an education at the managerial level and you have an education at the rep level. And helping them understand how this data is helping them is the most important step of having a data-driven culture, because it can actually free up time at the frontline salesperson's level, because you're pointing out to them where potential inefficiencies are, or maybe you're providing a mountain of information that the back office of your business had as a massive blind spot, and they were actually doing things that could have been counterproductive. So I'd say early on, setting that framework, heck, there were some days where it was 100% of my time, because I was trying to get the foundation there. And then eventually, once we got it set up, it became, obviously getting out and getting with customers is important. But when you think about non-customer facing time, there's an education, right? Setting it up, and then helping your managers, who this may be a new concept to, helping them understand why that's important and how it's going to help them and help their people. Because if you don't have a data-driven culture as a leader, ultimately what you're left with is trying to pick up the pieces from what scattered information your reps throw at you, and then provide cohesion as you manage up through the business. And then what ultimately happens, we as sales leaders get sucked into the constant ask of information, whether it be from marketing, products, senior leadership. Where's your forecast? What's it look like? How has it changed? Once you get everybody on board with the process and the belief that data-driven culture can actually help, man, it becomes a lot easier. So today, how much time do I spend? I might spend 10% of my time looking at the data, because my organization now, they're dialed in, they're in belief, it works for them, it works for us, and it helps us be successful. And then I get to, when I get on the calls with my managers, it's a lot easier too, because they know what I'm looking at and I know what they're looking at. And then we get on and say, hey, you see this? Yeah, I got that. Okay, where are we going? And it just allows us to then help our people with, okay, so I see these deals. What help do they need from the business? Who can I help you with? What calls can I get on? Where do you need assistance? And it's a pay up front, get the reward in the long term. And that would be a huge takeaway for me, is something I've learned, is the investment up front and establishing culture, whether it be any type of culture you want. It's critical. You're going to have to work overtime to establish the culture of where you want to take your business.
You also mentioned establishing a winning culture. So this is a two-tiered question, I guess.
Yeah.
How do you, I think my questions are always two-tiered, which I have to get better at not doing, but I can't help it.
It's all good.
But how do you establish a winning sales culture? And then how do you help reps that are struggling, or managers that are struggling to perform, right? They're consistently lagging. Is there a way to turn the folks that are, that are struggling, you can call them C players or whatever, into much better performance in A players?
Yeah, so let's bite off the first piece, which is, how do you establish a winning culture? Mm-hmm. I've chosen a profession, and anybody in sales has chosen a profession where you don't win every day. As a matter of fact, you probably lose more than you win, and that could be, a cold call doesn't go bad, an opportunity, you lose to competition, you're banging away on the phones and you don't get any reply. Well, that then is countered with, hey, I got a meeting. We celebrate those. Yes, it's little, it's baby steps, but you got to celebrate the little things along the way. And also you celebrate the wins, because when the wins happen, that's the best day of any rep. And depending on your business model, you might have one of those days a year, or you might have 30, 40 days of those a year, right? Because if you're transactional versus one big bang deal a year, you gotta celebrate that. And the best way to create a winning culture, I think, is just consistency about acknowledging the steps of progress, whether it be customer feedback that, listen, we're all, everybody in sales right now is looking at the customer experience, gaining NPS analyses through customer surveys. And when those come in, hey, I make it a point to let our reps know you're doing the right thing, right? So once you establish that winning culture, right, and you call out the people that are doing it, you then find yourself, right, not everybody's winning. It's impossible, right, to have everybody win at one time. As a matter, I can only think of one time in my entire career where I was on a single team where everybody made club, right? That it's so rare, right? So what do we do for the people that are scuttling? The first thing is, I mean, the obvious qualification is as a leader, can the person do the job, right? And that's a whole different personnel discussion for another day. But I would say, assuming that you believe the person can do the job, then it's a matter of we discussions versus you discussions. And what I mean by that is, what can we do together? What do you need from us, right? Versus you need to do more, you need to do this, you need to do that. Because once you make them singular and put them in a box, they then feel like they're not only fighting the sales model of their business, right, to drive business, but they also feel isolated. So we're very much on, okay, here's what we see, this is where we're at, what can we do to help you? And then once you calibrate around that, quite frankly, Jay, it's about embracing the grind. You got to have a belief that what you're doing in your professional, in the best of your professional capability is going to lead to the results. Because if you're listening to your leadership, you're taking the coaching, you know your customers, you've invested the time, you're calibrating your efforts, it will pay off. So it's just a matter of reinforcement versus punitive discussions.
Do you think when you are able to have that we discussion, if you will, and calibrate the way that you just described, if the person does not buy in, right? In other words, if they don't have the belief, would you say that that's typically where the breakdown is? Because if they don't believe, then they're not going to put in the time and the activity necessary, or?
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, listen, at the end, we've chosen a profession where the numbers dictate success. And it is very unique, right? In that it's not like I'm an accountant and my activity is subjective to, wow, they killed it this year, right? In sales, you either do it or you don't, right? And 100% means you did your job for the year. If someone loses the fire, that's a whole different discussion, because some people may grow out of the company, grow out of the role. There might even be a disconnect of personality between that person and their leader. And if you're keeping your finger on the pulse of your business, you can pick up on some of those interpersonal dynamics. But ultimately, if you're, again, I bring it back to, if you're having an honest discussion with people about how we can help you as a business, help the individual contributor, more often than not comes out of that is the candid feedback. And then as a leader, that's where you got to listen, right? Because if you're not listening, you might miss out on some of the clues that person's given you.
Yeah, for sure. I want to go back to something you said earlier, which was, your job is, not just to coach them on that particular skill necessarily, like the overall thing is to help them develop transferable skills.
Yeah.
What are those transferable skills that you were referring to, and why is that important to you?
Yeah, I mean, listen, especially if you're selling on the technology side and people have the acumen to sell cutting edge technology, they're also going to be wired to want to go sell the next cutting edge technology after the current, whatever they're selling, widget, software package, whatnot, becomes stale, right? And so when we look at people, teaching them and helping them understand the ability to size up the opportunity and objectively plan and how to manage their time in a manner that allows them to maximize and monetize their time is really what it gets back to, right? When I have a term of what I try and hire for, and it's, I want a sales athlete, right? Someone that's out there that's not afraid to play the game and frankly, not afraid to lose, right? You know, Michael Jordan, you know, he has a quote where he says, you know, I've taken, you know, 1,000 game-ending shots, but, you know, I've missed more than I've ever made. And why is he one of the greatest? It's because he wasn't afraid to lose, right? And the same goes for salespeople, right? You either believe or you don't, right?
You mentioned something earlier that you said we'll save for another day, but I want to try to squeeze it in now if we can.
Sure.
In the next 5 minutes or so before we get into the rapid fire 5, which is, you said, can the person do the job, right? In other words, and that's an entirely separate issue. How do you go about evaluating that particular aspect of it after the person's obviously been hired, right? In other words, they're in the seat, they've been there for however long they've been there, and you really have to take a close look and say, is this person capable of doing what we're asking them to do?
Yeah, I think when you're at a senior level, you know, the first thing I always do is I get with my managers and I say, give me an evaluation of your team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then ask them to provide the overview of their organization. And then I align that with the vision of where, if you're in middle senior management, right, you know where the executives want to take it, and you start asking yourself, okay, what's the skill set we need? What are the traits we need of an organization if we're going to achieve the long-term goals of the future, not how did we do it in the past? And then it just becomes a candid discussion with, are we in a position to be successful in the long term with person X versus, you know, in the short term, yes, they may have a win, but are they really doing the things that lead to long-term success? And then the best part is it becomes the job of the senior leader to then articulate the expectations to the entire organization and say, this is where we're going, right? And these are the expectations, and make it clear. Now, there will be longstanding people that will always push back because they don't like change, right? And I think if we haven't learned how to change and adapt here in the last 18 months, we probably never will, right? But it really comes down to setting the expectations, making it crystal clear, and then holding accountability. And at the end of the day, this is the beauty of sales. You're accountable for your number and you're accountable for your actions. If you refuse to take accountability, that's typically the break-even point of where, if they're not going to even be accountable for themselves, then why should we continue to invest in them, right? So that's ultimately where we get back to.
Yes. Okay. I'm realizing that we're coming to the end of the hour here, and I have the rapid fire 5 questions that I want to ask you, but I actually have recently updated them from the ones that I typically ask. And I want to see if I can find them really quickly so that I'm not asking.
The
questions.
Suspense is building.
That's right. I don't want to ask questions that I don't want to ask anymore. How about that? Hold on. Let me see if I can. Oh, here they are right here. Okay, cool. All right, found them. All right, so you ready? These are the rapid fire 5 that I've been asking probably the last 5 guests or so. How about that?
All right,
here's the first one. Do you have a philosophy or general approach as to how to prioritize your time?
Yeah, it always starts with my people first and business second, because I can't expect anybody that I work with in my organization to give me their very best if they have something at home that is taking them away, right? I mean, I've been unfortunately fortunate that I've lived it where when home is out of balance, right, it can bring negative consequences to your day-to-day efforts. And back to what I said earlier, you only have so much time. So helping people get right, get what they need, the support they need to be, maybe get some space or give them something more, right? That's always my priority as my people.
Tell me about a setback and how you overcame it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Every day's a setback in sales, right? You think you got to lead, but I think to be honest with you, it's my upbringing in that I could have sulked that I was an only child of a single parent. I could have come from difficult situation, just not having a lot growing up and using that to fuel me. My mom did the best she could, but and she did a great job with what she had. And I use that now as motivation when I'm a parent, to motivate me as a professional to do the best I can to provide the best opportunities I can for me and my kids and my wife.
Speaking of that, how do you manage stress or prevent stress from overcoming you?
Yeah, I think it comes down to not getting too high, not getting too low. I mean, it's funny. I was just talking with a senior leader at another business, sales leader, and it's some people look at a number and freak out, meaning a quota. And now I'm just like, yeah, it's a quota, right? And if you don't allow yourself to get too high or too low, it allows you to keep your stress levels pretty low. Now, hey, like anybody, quarter end is we're here in the middle of. Yeah, I mean, I have my guilty pleasures, whether it be my poor attempts at playing golf or getting out and being with friends. But to be honest with you, my biggest passion right now is supporting my kids in their endeavors as they go through school and try and be the best they can be.
How old are your kids?
I got a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old.
Okay, that's right. That's right. What do you do? What do you want to do to get better at right now?
Personally, golf. Professionally, I think where I'd really like to get to is being able to just really help my team with this evolution of where we're going in sales right now. It used to be face-to-face all the time as much as you can, to the pendulum swings the other way and it's virtual all the time. And now it looks like it's going to settle back somewhere in the middle. And do I have the right people, processes, and tools in place to help my people? And frankly, that's on me to be out there trying to stay ahead of things and help predict and support my people.
I love it. And what are you most excited about right now, personally and professionally?
Personally, we talked about it before we went live, Jay, right? We've all been sitting on a lot of PTO to be able to get out here. Looks like post-COVID and get a little PTO. Certainly thrilled about that. But professionally, I'm most excited. It's very promising out there from the economy. Business right now is ripe for those that are willing to invest in, from a sales perspective, and to engage in themselves and invest in themselves and in their job. And it's exciting to see success for so many people last year that might have had to embrace that grind we talked about earlier today. To see that success come out now. You talk about a winning culture. Just this morning, I sent out an email to a guy that we had to have it'll be okay. How can we help you? And now he is killing it, and couldn't be more thrilled for him. And the best part is I got some people fast on his heels, and I'm thrilled for them. So that's what I'm most excited about at work.
I love it. That's fantastic. I can see it in your face too. That's great in your body language. I guess one other question, which is, how can folks reach out to you to say thank you, get in touch with you, perhaps maybe apply for a job if you're hiring? What's the best way for people to reach out?
Yeah, LinkedIn, no doubt. You'd be shocked at the amount of interaction that's driven through there, especially with the networks, and just a lot of people reconnecting. LinkedIn is the best way to go. we at Verisk are hiring, and there's a lot of opportunity here at Verisk.
Deric Peterson, Deric with a C, by the way, D-E-R-I-C, no K, Peterson, P-E-T-E-R-S-O-N. Find him on LinkedIn. Mention this podcast episode that he can prioritize you. You'll stand out in his inbox, so to speak. And Deric Peterson, I want to say thank you for going over quota.
Thanks, Jay.
Goodbye, everybody. I'm back. Cue the music.